8 out of 10 clinicians thinking of doing something beyond clinical work are thinking about getting into health tech. So that's what I thought I'd focus this one on. I thought I'll talk about how you can get into health tech. And what I have here is a case study submitted by one of yourselves. Thanks, Alisha, for submitting the request to be a case study for one of these videos. Alisha is an OBGYN resident doctor here in the UK, and she's got a special interest in UX, which is user experience. And she's got a very clear lens of looking at patient outcomes and patient experience in the space of women's health. And she's now also a fellow with Byte Labs Digital Health. However, when we had a conversation, Alicia came to me and she said, look, I have the space where women that I see in my clinic aren't fully satisfied with the existing apps out there. And I'm studying about user experience and everything that can go into usage of products that are designed to help patients. And there's so many things that can be cross covered. But I don't know how to actually make something off of this. How do I get into the space of health tech? And how do I get this to replace some of my clinical income? So here's a little bit of a dive, building on the story behind Alicia. You can go check her out on LinkedIn if you like. She does some fantastic work. And I'll tell you what I shared with her and what my take on figuring out your niche as a clinician founder in this health tech space could be. So watch on. Gonna start with going across a little bit with what Alicia's about section says. So she says she's an OBGYN resident doctor. She's talked about a story of how digital tools in women's health can shape patient encounters. She's got a story about a patient with endometriosis. The patient's words are there. And this is what I love working with clinician founders. We're so good at being advocates for our patients and really shaping healthcare with that lens makes it so much more purposeful, so much more valuable. But yeah, she talks about how the pain can be such a complex thing, but it's simply reduced down to a 1 to 10. She talks about how femtech made her realize how much it needs to evolve for complex conditions. And she's interested in creating a bunch of solutions across complex pelvic pain, reducing burden on patients, reflecting real life patterns, and supporting people who use the apps rather than frustrating them even further. So there's very, very clear skills. So if I bring up my zone of impact framework here with the three circles, and in the middle is where your impact lies, right there, then the three bits that Alicia's got covered really, really well for her is firstly her purpose is very clear. She's clearly helping in the space of women's health, and she's helping with app experience is sort of where the discussion started from. The second thing that she's got going for her is the way she has influence in this field. And that's both with her experience as a doctor, but also her lens of looking at the world through UX. And lastly, the assets that she's creating. So this was the last bit of the puzzle that we had to work out in terms of what are the assets that she can create that allow her to express her zone of impact and actually start getting some value and compounding interest and opening up some opportunities. And this is the bit that I want to kind of get into today in terms of what did we do? How did we get Alicia to start speaking to the right people, having opportunities open up for her, and finally get into health tech? Now, before I do get into that, I want to talk about something I've noticed everybody really wants. And I don't know this about Alicia, but we're going to make assumptions because we're going to carry on with the case study. The formula I like to use is 2212. And that's to say that people who are looking beyond clinical work and aren't entirely running away from their clinical work, are often still want to do 2 days clinical, right? They like the patient interaction, but they hate the employee bit of it. They want 2 days spent on their own thing. This could be as a founder or an innovator or an advisor, various combinations. 1 day for yourself would be ideal, but often most people tend to club it with the other one, which is for family. And it's surprising how the more and more I speak to people doing things beyond clinical work, this unique combination of going from 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 is really what we're after. And so while this is very clear, what stands out about most clinician founders is the fact majority of them, despite how good their ideas are still invisible. Many of them are hesitant to speak up, be seen, and remain silent. And that leads to them just remaining unknown. And they sit in this space hoping to get into health tech, hoping for opportunities to unlock. And they just simply don't. It can take many, many years for things to move forward beyond this point. And what you really want is to be seen for both your expertise, but also who you are. You don't want to be just speaking up, you actually want to be heard. So you want to be saying things that people care about. And you don't just want to be known, you want to be trusted. Because once you've got these three things, once you're seen, once you're heard, once you're trusted, is when things start to flow, when things start to move forward. And getting to this point means tackling a lot of external barriers, but also internal challenges. So what I did was, in a recent workshop with clinician founders, I asked them, what are some of your external barriers and internal challenges? And here are some of the common things that kept coming up. Externally, there's a lack of time, lack of bandwidth, a lot of energy loss, especially with clinical work still ongoing full time for many of them. Lack of spaces where people can actually be seen, heard, and trusted. We spend so much time in hospital and with our colleagues where that's not really a priority and that's not the space in which this kind of work happens. But there were more internal challenges than external barriers. There was challenges around inconsistency, around having an unclear idea, the uncertainty, the micro decisions along the way, the fear of failure, the need for perfectionism, and how that's actually served us in our lives as clinicians but doesn't serve us anymore. And the systems that we need to create to really be able to balance ourselves as a clinician and a founder. And so, coming back to Alisha, if we focus in on the first element of this, getting her seen, there's three real aspects around getting seen, three things that needs to be established. And the assets that we were talking about earlier, these assets, what are they for Alisha that need to be created? So there's going to be assets around choosing a platform. Where do you kind of turn to look for the people you want to serve, but also like-minded people that could support you? You know, what are your opinions that are valuable to the world? What is your philosophy? What is your perspective as a clinician in the women's health space that isn't currently talked about enough, that needs to be seen more, that if seen more supports your mission in the long term? And lastly, what is your personal brand like? Who are you? What can people expect from you? All of those questions need to be answered. So for Alicia, let's dive deeper into that question about the platform. And there were really three things that we need to figure out before we can choose the platform that we find our clients and supporters on. And that is who do you serve? What problem do you solve for them? And actually, realistically, how do you solve it for them? And each three of these questions, once answered, will help you move from where you are currently. So currently, majority of the people I speak to, most of the clinicians that are facing these external barriers and internal fears are quite scattered. You've got lots of ideas, but you don't know where to focus. You're a bit spooked. You don't want to make mistakes on this journey, especially with the credibility of the career that you've made, and you're stuck. You don't know what's coming up next. You don't know which direction you're heading. And despite trying a lot of things, you remain exactly where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so this bit about scattered is directly tackled by these three questions of who do you help, what problem do you help them with, and how do you help them? So if you can figure these three things out, you're going to be well on your way from moving from being scattered to having a clear direction. So coming back to Alicia, after a bit of back and forth and thinking through various exercises, here's what we found out as version one of what she could go out and test. So version one of this, of who she helps, is femtech, actually not even femtech, it'd be women's health owners, yeah, aka founders or developers, right? That was who she would be able to help best. What would she help them with? So, what was the problem that these founders were having that she would help them with? Now, how I would actually do this in real life is to use AI tools to help me do a secondary market research and then a primary market research through interviews. But to start off with, we took a guess. So we said, okay, what are some of the likely problems that they might have that you want to help them with? And it's not just about the patient experience. It's not just about the money that the app makes. It's realistically, what are they trying to achieve that you could help them achieve better? And by better, I mean more accurately, or faster. That's the only two things that matter under that category. And if you don't know the answer to this, that's okay. You go out and take a guess. Some of the things that Alisha and I brainstormed together were that, there could be metrics around retention. So how many users retain and use the app? What is the frequency of the usage? What is the referral percentage? So how many people refer the app onto other people? Obviously, there's ratings on the App Store, there's comments in terms of qualitative data. There is speed to, a specific function. Is it an alignment? What are the challenges that these specific app owners are facing, and what can you realistically support them with? Now, with Alisha's background in women's health as an OBGYN resident, without even any further training or certification, what her perspective in itself could help immediately with alignment. It could help with the frequency of usage. It could help with retention by improving the outcomes and having a better understanding of what patients are realistically looking for. And arguably, if they were looking at a clinician network for referral, that could be something they could do as well. We had to choose just a few to get started and start testing in the next few days. The question then came to, how do you actually help them? Alisha obviously has some interest in UX. She is a doctor, but she's not a coder and she's not got compliance certifications. So those are not the spaces in which she would help them. And so that realistically left a couple of options. She could go in as an advisor, she could go in as an employee, and she could go in as a consultant, or she could just go in as a doctor doing some research for them, fill out a couple of surveys for them, tell them how to use it. But realistically, that wouldn't fully leverage her expertise. So how does she show her expertise? We decided that the platform that would be best for Alisha would be LinkedIn. And why is it LinkedIn? It's because that's where the founders are. It's a text-based platform, which meant that it was easy for her to use while still doing her clinical work. Is still an underutilized platform. Posting once a day for the whole, posting once a day, every day for the week would put her in the top 5% of all LinkedIn users and immediately gather a lot of interest in the work that she was doing. Now, how do you know what to post? So what I generally say is one per day, or at least minimum of 3 times per week, is what you want to be aiming for. And you're looking for text plus image as the post that you're making. All right. So what do you actually post about? What do you talk about? And I've got a Voice of Impact GPT. I'll leave a link to that in the comments. That helps you brainstorm ideas, asks you about your ideal audience, then asks you questions that it can convert into posts for you. And I end up doing my posts in under 8 minutes using this GPT. So if you want that, that's going to be in the description below. But there's 3 simple buckets that work really well for early founders, or if you're trying to get active on LinkedIn and build not just a massive following, but a following of people who trust you, who believe in you, who realistically could access your services and pay you for them. So the first bucket is talking about what you do. And this isn't just the clinical work or the non-clinical work, but what are the outcomes? What are the outcomes that you can realistically deliver for somebody like them? The next bucket is to talk about how you do it. Alisha would talk about the UX principles. She did a really good set of posts comparing existing apps for women's health, and that did really well for her. You could do like layout changes. You could demonstrate things with AI. You could demonstrate user journeys. You could have interviews that demonstrate your expertise in bringing out insights from users and patients that would help design the app even better. So showcasing how you do them, how your actual day-to-day function would benefit the person you're working for. And the last thing to talk about is why you're doing them. What is the story behind who you are and why you do what you do? So you as a doctor, but you also as a UX, you also as someone who cares about women's health. Because people don't invest in what you do, they invest in why you do it, as Simon Sinek has said time and time again. So if you're looking at posting, LinkedIn 3 times per week, you do this on Monday, You do this on Wednesday, you did this on Friday, and you're good. You can do this on a Sunday if you want, schedule it for 3 days, and off you go. All you got to do is post them, right? And the success measure is not likes, and it's not the comments, and it's not the followers. That is not what you measure success by. You measure success by one thing only: the number of conversations you can have as a result of that post. So that means going into DMs, the people that have liked it, send them a message. People that have reposted your app, you send them a message. People that have left a comment, you send them a message, and you get on a call. You get to know who they are, let them get to know who you are, have a conversation, ask them for networks, ask them for connections, ask them for challenges, understand things better. And that allows you to go back right all the way up here to say, actually, who am I best suited to help? Out of all of these problems, which one matters the most to them? And how can I support them in the way that is most in alignment with who I am? So if there was one playbook for you to take away, that's probably what it would be. Now, if you're struggling with figuring out what to post, or if you're struggling with doing the who, what, and how, there's various exercises and tables and workshops that we do inside of the Clinician Founder Action Ship, where you'll work with other clinician founders through similar challenges. And if you're interested in that, just drop me a message at any point. But hopefully that was useful for you to kind of think about, how do I actually get into health tech with the existing challenges that I have? And thanks again, Alisha, for volunteering to have your profile as a case study. If anybody else watching this would like me to do a case study for them with their unique interests, with the ideas that they're holding on to, then do comment down below or drop me a message on LinkedIn or find me on Instagram at Ships as Impact. And I would love to do this for you. See you in the next one.